I'm honestly still shaking a bit writing this. I was standing there in the dark, baby, finally asleep, just scrolling through our shared calendar when I saw it. Just one word, meeting. But the location was an address 422 Oak Lane. I don't know anyone on Oak Lane. I tried the family laptop to check his email, and the password didn't work. Our password, the one we've used for like 6 years, with the kids' birthdays, was just gone. I stood there in the hallway just staring at the screen. Like, who changes a shared password at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday? I didn't even wake him up. I just went to bed and tried to act in its normal, which is basically impossible when you've had like 4 hours of sleep. The next few days were just a total nightmare. Between fighting with insurance over a surgery bill and the mortgage payment jumping up for no reason, I was at my absolute breaking point. I actually told Mark, I need to get out of the house for an hour or I'm going to lose it. So I went to Day Maddox just to wander the aisles and clear my head. While I was there, my phone pings. Life 360. Mark's icon was at a gas station 3 towns over. He works in the city. There is zero reason for him to be that far in the opposite direction at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. I didn't even buy anything, I just left and went home. I started spiraling and went straight for the shoebox in the closet, where we keep the tax receipts. I was just digging through everything: Target receipts, utility bills, and I found a florist receipt from 3 weeks ago. Lilies and roses. The pickup was in that same town where had been on Life 360s. I just sat there on the floor, feeling weirdly numb. Then Friday comes, kids' school art show. I spent the whole morning stressing about outfits and praying the minivan would actually start, because the battery has been acting up. I get to the gym around 6 and see Mark by the snacks, just chatting with some dads. He looked totally normal, just the same guy I've been married to for 20 years. Then I see Sarah, my sister. She and Mark have always been best friends. The kind of thing I never questioned because she's the cool aunt who helps with everything. But she was wearing this silk wrap dress that is way too tight for a primary school art show. She was leaning in, whispering in his ear, and Mark actually laughed and touched the small of her back. It was fast, but I saw it. I walked straight up to them. No yelling, nothing. I just stopped in front of them. Hey, Sarah, I said. She literally jumped. Oh, Donna, didn't see you there, she says. Mark just smiled. Hey, babe, you make it in okay? I looked at Sarah. Nice dress, new. Oh, this, yeah, just something I picked up, Sarah said. She couldn't even look me in the eye. I didn't say anything else. I just walked away to look at the kids' art. Then my phone buzzed. A text from a random number. I looked over and Mark's face went completely pale. He locked his phone and shoved it in his pocket, looking around the room. I didn't move. I just opened the shared iCloud album on my iPad and scrolled back to a folder from June labeled work trip. No conferences, no hotels, just a few photos of a living room with a blue velvet sofa. I knew that Sofasora bought it for her new place last year. I walked back to Mark while he was trying to talk about lawn care with some other dad. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed the phone out of his hand and shoved the iPad in his face, showing him the photo of the sofa. Mark looked at the screen, then looked at me. The whole room was full of people and kids laughing, and he just stood there. Frozen. I didn't even let him finish. Turned around and walked to the car. I'm sure the other parents were staring, and the kids were confused, but I didn't care. I wanted to get in the minivan and lock the doors. About 10 minutes later, Mark knocks on the window. He had that look on his face at this one, where he thinks, if he looks pathetic enough, he'll forget everything. I rolled the window down a couple of inches. Donna, can we go home and talk? He asked. I don't care, Mark, go away. I can't even look at you right now, I told him. He tried to say it wasn't what it looked like, that he and Sarah had been talking about the marriage, and she was a place for him to vent. I looked at him. Vent? In a wrap dress on a velvet sofa? Give me a break. He didn't have an answer for that. Anyway, we go home, and the next 2 weeks are just weird. He didn't really apologize, but he started this healing thing. He told me we needed professional help, but not a therapist. He called David Davidson. David is a guy Mark has known since college. He's a consultant, but really he's just a guy who uses corporate buzzwords for everything. Mark insisted David was the only one who could help us navigate the transition. We ended up sitting in the living room on a Tuesday. I had my old leggings on, because my left knee was killing. I think I messed it up pulling weeds in the garden over the weekend, and it wouldn't stop throbbing. David is sitting there in a crisp white shirt, leaning back in our armchair, looking at me like I was some project he was getting paid to manage. "Donna," David said, "I think we need to move away from the evidence for a moment. The photos, the locations, those are just symptoms. The real issue is the emotional vacuum in your marriage." "The emotional vacuum is my husband sleeping with my sister," I said. I sat there. The audacity of this guy to come into my house and tell me the cheating was actually because I wasn't providing enough validation. Mark was nodding along, looking at David like he knew everything. "I want to know why her," I said. "Look, Donna, we have to look at the synergy here," David replied. "Mark is operating at a high frequency, and you guys have a misalignment of expectations. It's basically a transactional issue. Now, if you can agree to a period of radical transparency where Mark manages the communication, I think we can move past this." Radical transparency, that's what he called it, which basically meant Mark got to decide what I was allowed to know. For the next month, I went on autopilot. I did the chores, the errands, all that on Thursday. I spent 3 hours on the phone with the health insurance company over a bill from my gallbladder surgery last year. I was on hold for 45 minutes, listening to some distorted version of Girl from Ipanema that made me want to scream, only to be told the doctor was out of network, even though the hospital was in network. I hung up feeling this surge of anger, but it wasn't even about the bill. It felt like everything in my life was a scam. Then the notice from the mortgage company came. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a shoebox of crumpled receipts, trying to get everything organized for the CPA, since it was almost April. I was sorting through Target runs and gas station stops, and I opened the escrow statement. The property taxes went up, and our monthly payment was jumping by $300. I stared at the paper. $300. I looked across the room at Mark, who was on his phone, probably venting to Sarah, and I realized I was done with the bridge building. Crap. Saturday, 10 a.m. He goes to the gym the second the garage door closed. I tried the laptop, but he'd changed the passwords again. I slammed it shut and went straight to his truck. I got in and plugged in my phone, but then I stopped. I didn't need it. I went into the Apple CarPlay settings and looked at the recent destinations. The GPS doesn't lie. There it was, 1422 Oak Lane. It wasn't just there once. It was there 3 times a week for the last 2 months. And then, right under it, a place I didn't recognize, the Velvet Rose Boutique. I spent the next hour in the driveway, fighting with the family iPad. He'd forgotten to sign out of the home screen, but it took me forever to figure out where he'd put things. Eventually, I found a hidden folder in the photos. He tried to be slick, but he'd synced the whole thing to the cloud. There were photos. Not just the sofa. They were at a beach house in July. Sarah was wearing this gold locket, and I knew for a fact she didn't buy that herself. I recognized the brand. I'd seen one at the mall when Mark claimed he was buying a gift for his mom last Christmas. I felt sick. I think I almost threw up. I started shaking, but I kept taking screenshots of everything. Every destination, every photo, every text that had synced to the iPad. I sent them all to a secret Gmail account I'd made the night before. Then, I went back to the shoebox. I started digging through the credit card statements from the last 6 months. I stopped looking for flowers and started looking for lodging. I found it. A bunch of charges for a boutique inn in a town 2 hours away. $400 here, $600 there. He'd been using a business expense account to pay for it. He was using company money to fund the affair with my sister. I was still sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by Target receipts and the mortgage statement, when I heard the garage door open. I didn't move. I left the iPad open on the counter. I didn't hide the screenshots. I left the image of the gold locket and the hotel charges facing up. Mark walked in humming some song, looking relaxed from his workout. He stopped at the counter to put his keys down and saw the iPad. He didn't say anything for a long time. I could hear him breathing. "Donna," he said, his voice flat. "What is this?" I didn't look up from the receipts. "The property taxes went up," I said. "We're short $300 a month." "What does that have to do with?" I interrupted, finally looking at him. "I'm sure you can find a way to cover that. Maybe you can stop staying at the boutique inn, or maybe Sarah can pay for it with her low-pressure budget." Mark's face went from pale to a weird kind of gray. He looked at the iPad, then at me. "I can explain the business account," he said. I don't want an explanation, Mark. I want the password to the joint savings account. He didn't answer. He just stood there staring at the screen. I stood up, my knee popping loudly. I walked over to the counter and slid the iPad toward him, the screen still glowing with the photo of Sarah and the locket. Get out, I said. Donna, let's call David. We can work through this with David. I looked at him. I was too tired to even be angry. I don't care who you call. Get your stuff and get out of my house before I lose it. I walked out of the room and went into the pantry to start the dishwasher. I could hear him standing there in the kitchen just breathing, while the dishwasher started with a loud clunk. Mark didn't even fight me on it. He just grabbed a duffel bag, threw in some of his expensive clothes and left. He didn't even look at the kids' rooms on his way out. Just gone. Wait, did he even take his phone charger? No, I found it plugged into the wall behind the nightstand 2 days later. I didn't really cry, and I didn't get that huge sense of relief I thought I would. I was just beat. I spent the next few days in a total fog. Honestly, the house was a disaster. I couldn't even find a clean pair of socks that didn't have a hole in the toe. And the dishwasher had this weird fishy smell that wouldn't go away, no matter how many pods I threw at it. I spent way too much time scrubbing the filter, while I was trying to figure out how to tell the kids. Their dad was staying at a hotel. I told them he had some work project that required him to be away. For a bit it was a lie, obviously, but I couldn't handle a meltdown while I was still jumping every time my phone buzzed. Anyway, by Tuesday, I was back to digging through the files. I had a meeting with a divorce attorney on Thursday. Was it Friday? No, definitely Thursday. So, I knew I needed a full financial picture. I was sitting at the kitchen table with folders everywhere, trying to organize everything. My knee was killing. It spent the previous afternoon raking wet leaves, and I think I just overdid it. I had a heating pad on my leg while I worked. I was trying to print out the last 6 months of bank statements, but the printer was being a nightmare. It kept giving me this ink low error, even though I'd just replaced the cartridge. I spent 20 minutes fighting with the thing, clicking ignore over and over. I swear. Everything is made of the cheapest plastic possible. Now the buttons felt like they were going to snap off under my finger. It was 11 p.m., and I was literally losing it over a piece of hardware in my kitchen. Then I noticed something. I was looking at the mortgage statement again. The one where the payment jumped by $300. I'd called the bank earlier that day. But the woman on the phone was useless. She just kept talking about escrow and tax increases. Then put me on hold for 15 minutes, while I listened to some crappy, distorted jazz track. But once I actually got the statement printed, I saw a line item. I didn't recognize it wasn't a tax increase. It was a monthly payment for a home equity line of credit, a HELOC. I just stared at the paper. We didn't have a HELOC. Mark and I had talked about one 2 years ago for the kitchen remodel. But we decided against it because the interest rates were too high. I hopped on the computer and logged into our joint banking portal. But the HELOC account wasn't showing up on the main dashboard. I started digging through the Documents tab, looking for the original loan agreement. I found a PDF dated 8 months ago. I opened the file and just stopped. It was a loan for $60,000, and there it was, my signature at the bottom of the page. But it wasn't my signature. I mean, it looked like it. At a glance it said Donna W. Doherty, but I know how I sign my name. Something about it just felt off. It was too clean, like someone had traced it. It was a fake. A cold feeling hit me. I wasn't even thinking about the affair anymore. I was just thinking about the fact that my husband had committed fraud. I started scrolling through the loan documents to see where the money went. The funds hadn't gone into our joint account. They'd been transferred to a separate one. I looked at the recipient's name on the wire transfer. Dawn Carr. Sarah's legal name is Sarah Dawn Carr. She's always gone by Sarah, but on legal papers it's Dawn. I sat there in the kitchen, with the heating pad still buzzing on my knee, and the printer still blinking ink low, and I realized my sister hadn't just been the other woman. She'd helped him steal $60,000 from our house. I didn't call Mark or Sarah. I just opened the shared iCloud account again. I remembered that Mark had a notes app that synced across all his devices. It never really looked in there before because it was usually just grocery lists and random reminders. I searched for the word bank. I found a note from last September. It was a list. I felt like I couldn't breathe. He'd used my passport. He'd gone into my dresser, found my passport, and used it to forge my name on a loan for 60 grand. He must have found a notary who was either lazy or in on it. I spent the next 4 hours just documenting everything. I took screenshots of the note, saved the PDF of the forged loan, and found the wire transfer confirmation. I sent everything to my secret Gmail account. Then I printed them all out, even though the printer was still screaming about the ink. The pages came out streaky and faded. But the numbers were clear. The next morning, I went to the grocery store. I didn't want to stay in the house. I spent an hour in the clearance aisle at HomeGoods, just looking at weirdly shaped vases and throw pillows. I was just wandering, trying to keep my hands from shaking. While I was looking at some candles, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah. "Hey Donna, I know things are tense, but I really think we should talk for the sake of the kids. Mark is really struggling." I didn't reply. I stood there for a minute, and things just felt very clear. I went home and waited for Mark. I knew he came by every Tuesday to pick up his gym bag and some clean laundry. I'd left a bag of his clothes on the porch, but I'd also left the front door unlocked. When he walked in, he looked better. He was wearing a new watch, a nice one. I recognized the brand. It was a Tag Heuer. Those cost at least $3,000. "Hey," he said, stepping into the entryway. "I just came for the bag, Mark." "Get in the kitchen," I said. "I really don't think that's a good idea." David said we should maintain boundaries until— I don't give a shit what David said. "Get in the kitchen." He sighed and followed me. He looked annoyed, like I was inconveniencing him. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I just reached over to the counter and slid the streaky, faded printouts of the HELOC and the Notes app screenshot toward him. Mark looked down. He saw the 60,000. He saw Dawn Carr. He saw the list about the passport and the notary. He went completely pale. He actually stepped back, hitting the edge of the kitchen table. "What is this?" he asked. "It's a loan, Mark." "A loan you took out in my name," I said with a forged signature. "And you gave the money to my sister." He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. He looked at the papers, then looked at me. "I was going to pay it back," he said. "With what money?" "The money you're spending on watches? The money Sarah is using to decorate her new place." "It was an investment," he said. "Sarah had a business idea boutique, and we just needed a bridge loan. I was going to move the money back before you ever noticed." The property taxes went up. "Mark," I noticed. The mortgage payment jumped by $300. I noticed. He tried to reach out and touch my arm. "Donna, look, we can fix this. I can talk to the bank. I can find a way to settle the balance." I stepped back. I didn't want him touching me. I felt like if he touched me, I'd actually be sick. "You used my passport," I said. "You forged my name. That's not a mistake, Mark. That's a crime. That's bank fraud." He stopped. The pathetic look he usually wore, the one that was supposed to make me feel sorry for him, vanished. He looked at me with this cold, hard expression I'd never seen in 20 years. "Are you going to the police?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I said, "but I've already sent the documents to my lawyer." He stood there for a second, just staring at me. Then he looked at the papers on the counter. "You always were too focused on the details, Donna," he said. I didn't even know how to respond to that. The nerve of this man to criticize my focus on details while he was standing in my kitchen after stealing $60,000. "Get out," I said. "Just leaving," he replied. He turned around and walked out the door. He didn't even take the laundry bag. He just left. I stood there in the kitchen. I looked at the printer, which was still blinking its little orange light. I looked at the heating pad still strapped to my leg. Then I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah. She answered on the second ring. "Donna, I was just thinking about you." "I saw the wire transfer, Sarah," I said. "The 60,000. There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear her breathing. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "I have the PDF. I have the bank account number. I have the forged signature," I told her. "And I have a very good lawyer who is very interested in the concept of fraud." Donna, please, we can talk about this." "Mark told me you'd be understanding." He said, "Do you see why we had to do it?" "Understanding?" I asked. "You thought I'd be understanding about you and my husband stealing from my house." Are you seriously going to ruin my life over some money?" she snapped. "I'm your sister, for God's sake." I didn't say anything for a long time. I just listened to her breathe on the other end of the line. "In filing a police report on Monday," I said. "You wouldn't," she whispered. Your sister, you're a thief, I said. I hung up the phone. I went back to the table and started organizing the bank statements again. I had to make sure I hadn't missed anything else. I spent the next hour going through every single transaction from the last 3 years. I found a series of small payments, 50 here, 100, there to a company I didn't recognize. I looked it up. It was a high-end jewelry wholesaler. I sat back in my chair and looked at the clock. It was nearly midnight. I reached down and unstrapped the heating pad from my knee. The skin was red and irritated. I just sat there in the quiet, looking at the list of jewelry purchases, wondering what else was in there. I went to see Brenda on Monday morning. Actually, was it Monday? No, it was Tuesday. She's a divorce lawyer and looks like she hasn't slept in years. She drinks this coffee that looks like motor oil. I didn't even sit down at first. I dumped folders out of my bag and slid them across her desk. I told her everything: the forged loan, the wire transfers to my sister, and the stuff I found in the Notes app on Mark's phone. Brenda didn't say much. She put on her glasses and flipped through the papers. She stopped at the signature, squinted, and then looked at the form I'd signed when I walked in. She told me it was a total forgery. It didn't even look like my handwriting. I told her he'd taken my passport out of my dresser to do it. Brenda said that's identity theft, since a bank was involved. It was a federal thing. She told me I wasn't looking at a divorce anymore. This was a criminal case. I sat there. I told her I wanted everything: the house, the joint accounts, and that $60,000 back. She said, we could probably get the house because the fraud gave us leverage. Mark would either do what we wanted or risk prison. But the $60,000, she said, if Sarah already spent it, would have to go after her assets too. I told her Sarah doesn't have assets. She has a boutique, which is really a fancy closet in her spare room. The next few weeks were a blur of emails and PDFs. I spent most of my time at home and was starting to get stir-crazy. Every time I went into the kitchen, I'd notice something else Mark had ignored for years. The garbage disposal started making this high-pitched screeching sound. And I spent 45 minutes on my hands and knees, with a flashlight and pliers, trying to fish out a piece of plastic. My knee was throbbing and I had this weird oily gray sludge all over my palms that just wouldn't come off no matter how much soap I used. It was incredibly frustrating. While I was scrubbing the sink, my phone buzzed an email from Mark's lawyer. The email said Mark was willing to waive his claim to the house and give me a lump sum if I agreed not to file a police report about the Helak. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Brenda. She called me and told me he was trying to buy his way out of a felony. She told me not to agree to anything and to let him sweat, so I did. But I still had to deal with the passport. I went to the passport agency to get it flagged and replaced. I spent 6 hours in a waiting room under buzzing fluorescent lights. I was sitting between a guy who was snoring and a woman who kept trying to show me photos of her cats. I sat there, staring at the wall, thinking about how my husband had basically stolen my identity. When I finally got to the window, the clerk asked if I was reporting it stolen. No, I said. My husband used it to commit bank fraud. The clerk didn't even blink. She stamped the paper and told me it would take 6 to 8 weeks. When I got home, I saw a message from Sarah on my iPad. She'd tried to message me through the shared family calendar. She created an event for Tuesday called Family Healing Discussion. I deleted it and blocked her on everything. But Mark wouldn't stop. He started using Life 360 to track me. Wed had the app for years for the kids' school runs, and it'd forgotten he could still see me. It'd be at the store, looking at detergent, and it'd get a text. I see you're at the store. Can we talk for 10 minutes in the parking lot, please? I didn't answer. I turned the app off. Then I realized he'd probably get a notification that my location was paused. 10 minutes later, another text. Donna, don't do this. Think about the kids. Do you really want their father in prison? I was holding a bottle of laundry soap. I put it in the cart and walked away. In mid-April, I was having a nightmare with the cable company. My internet kept cutting out and I'd been on hold for 2 hours. I was at the kitchen table sorting through old tax documents for the CPA, and the woman on the phone was trying to tell me I needed some premium package just to get a technician to come out on a Friday. I couldn't even find my favorite pen, and I spent 5 minutes digging through a junk drawer just to find something that actually worked. The lady on the phone kept repeating herself in this robotic tone that made me want to throw the phone across the room. I told her I didn't want a package. I wanted the internet to work. While I was arguing with her, the doorbell rang. I looked at the camera. It was Mark and Sarah. Sarah was crying like full-on sobbing. Mark looked like a wreck. He was wearing a suit, but it was all rumpled. I didn't open the door. I talked through the speaker. "What are you doing here?" Sarah started wailing, saying she'd lost everything, that the boutique was gone. She'd sold her car to pay back part of the loan, and she was bankrupt. She begged me to tell Brenda to drop the civil suit. "You're bankrupt?" I asked. "That's a shame. I'm still paying the mortgage on a house you helped steal." She screamed that she'd pay me back every cent. Just don't let them ruin her credit, because she couldn't get a rental apartment. I looked at them through the camera. For a second, I felt that old habit of wanting to fix things, so the kids wouldn't have to deal with the mess. Then I remembered the Notes app and the radical transparency stuff. "Get off my porch," I said. Mark shouted that I should be reasonable and that he was my husband. "My lawyer is handling this," I told him. I muted the mic and watched them stand there for another 5 minutes. Mark knocked a few times, then they finally walked back to the car. The legal stuff was straightforward after that. Brenda didn't play games. We filed the police report for the identity theft and fraud. Once the police were involved, Mark's lump sum offer got a lot more generous. He didn't want to spend a weekend in county jail. He signed over the house. He waived the joint savings. He even agreed to alimony that was higher than the state guidelines, to keep the criminal charges from moving too fast. Brenda said the DA was still interested, but since Mark was cooperating and paying it back, they were looking at a deferred prosecution agreement. He wouldn't go to prison, but he'd be on probation for years. I didn't care about the probation. I wanted the money. The final meeting was in June at Brenda's office. Mark looked gray and hollow. He didn't look at me once. He just stared at the papers. Brenda told him to sign. He signed away the house, the equity, and agreed to pay back the $60,000 in installments over 5 years with interest. When it was over, he finally looked up. "I hope you're happy, Donna," he said. "I'm not happy, Mark," I told him. "I'm just done." He left without saying anything else. I walked out to the parking lot and sat in my car for a long time. I felt exhausted. I drove home and spent the afternoon organizing the plastic storage bins in the garage. I took everything out, old holiday stuff, the kids' old snow gear, broken toys, and sorted them into keep, donate, and trash. I found a box of photos from our honeymoon in Italy. Mark was smiling in all of them. I put the box in the trash pile. Around 4 p.m., my phone buzzed, a notification from the bank. The first restitution payment hit. $2,000. I looked at the screen, then went on Amazon and ordered a new garbage disposal. That evening, I sat on the back porch. My knee was still acting up, so I had a wrap on it. The kids were inside arguing about feeding the dog. The house was loud, and the dishwasher was making that weird clicking sound. I think a piece of silverware is leaning against the spray arm again. I'll have to deal with it later. I looked at the empty spot in the driveway where Mark's truck used to be. Then I went inside and started unloading the dishwasher.